are joining in. And half of them are Endeavor team. So let's wait for a couple of more. You can take the attendee list. It's on your site. Very cool joining in. And just to remind everyone, as people are joining in, that this is a panel discussion which is more of a roundtable discussion rather than a webinar in the sense, since this is an only discussion, and the people who are joining in are very cool. Even the conversation is going to be a lot really interesting as it gets more interactive. But before that, I would like to thank Evan, Las, Christos, Konstantinos, Yannis for joining in. This is an all-star panel, and we've been getting a lot of attention in the local market, and not just the local market. So thank you for joining. This is a topic that a lot of people are showing interest. Every single investment, every new acquisition, every new exit, every new foreign investor coming in Greece, this comes hotter and hotter, right? And seeing your engineering teams is something that it's interesting from a lot of perspectives: education, supply, and entrepreneurship, managing growth. There are a lot of things that we are working with our entrepreneurs. We've designed a vertical that it's dedicated to deep tech, and we're working with entrepreneurs. And I'm speaking as Endeavor Greece. We're working with entrepreneurs that are founders, Greek founders, and they are based anywhere in the world. Part of our ambition is not just to unite the high impact Greek entrepreneurs of the world, but it's also to work with them and increase the multiplier effect and repatriate some sort of their efforts in Greece. So we're working with many entrepreneurs. We're working with the universities, and we're doing really cool stuff. Part of that cool stuff is inviting you people here, and this is again, it's a really all-star panel, and thank you for joining. Technical stuff before I leave and I let this discussion go. People can, I mean, we will have a 45-minute or so of moderated discussion by Evan, and then we will open it up to questions, which will be the interactive part. You can either type your question on the chat, or you can raise your hand, and we will open up the mic for you to address the panel yourself. I would suggest, since we are, this is a really cool group, I would like to urge everyone to type their name, use the chat, make sure that that message is addressed to panelists and attendees, so everyone can see that, and type your name, where are you from, introduce yourself, write whatever you want, so we know everyone here. But with that, after the moderated discussion, and before we go to the Q&A, we'll also launch a quick poll of 3 questions, just because we're in the process of making a big partnership with platforms that educate and upskill people for high tech skills, and we're interested to learn a little bit more about how many people are you going to employ in the future, what skills are you looking for, what platforms are you using to upskill your personnel. But that's for the Q&A. Evan, the stage is yours, and thank you so much for.
All right, very cool. Thanks, Pano. Thanks everybody for joining. Sorry about the bit of noise that you're getting here. It's my son. I'm on toddler duty and multitasking this morning. So we're going to talk about scaling today, as Panos said. Scaling is hard in any year. Scaling is particularly hard in a year with the pandemic and with all the other challenges that this year has thrown at us. So we're going to talk about scaling in general. We're going to talk about scaling post-COVID, and we're going to zoom in and talk about how Greece fits into all that. Into the story of scaling. We have an all-star panel, as Panos said. Yanni Antonellis, who is the head of data science and data engineering for the AI platform at Facebook. We have Christos Trifonas, who is the co-founder and chief architect at Alsera. We have Las Vekiaridis, who is the product and engineering leader at AWS. And we have Konstantin Polychronopoulos, the VP of 5G and Telco Cloud at Juniper Networks. I'm Evan. I am the Global Head of Infrastructure at American Express, and I'm going to be your moderator today and babysitter in chief at the same time. So, without further ado, let's start with scaling in general. And I'd like to ask Yanni and Konstantina if you guys can talk a little bit about the growth that you've overseen in your current role, as well as in prior roles, and what success you had, what that growth enabled for you.
Thank you, Ivan. Should I start? Yeah, well, so growth, in terms of growth, it's moderate at Juniper Networks, but the company is growing significantly in markets that are emerging. 5G, as you probably know, is a growth market, and we see that both in the service providers sector as well as in the private mobile networks, a lot of demand. And I joined the company about 6 months ago, coming from VMware, where again, I saw significant growth. But here at Juniper, even though, Juniper is a well-established networking vendor, it's pivoting in, software-driven everything, right? And one of the things that I started right away is to establish a presence in Greece. We have now 4 employees in Greece, and the plan is to grow them to about a dozen in the next 8 to 12 months. We can talk about why I'm doing that, but it's based primarily on experience from the past that has brought major dividends to to the companies where I was before and which decided to invest in Greece. In terms of growth, overall companies are very careful given the situation, the pandemic and the unknowns, regarding several sectors of the industry. Some of them have been beneficiaries of this pandemic because of the need to, to have broadband access and use applications, enterprise applications on the go or from home. And as you very well know, Zoom has been perhaps the most high-profile beneficiary. They cannot keep up with the growth demand. Interestingly, the cloud has been really a catalyst for this growth. Oftentimes, it has been unanticipated. But I would say, from my vantage point, in terms of hiring, especially in development teams, there are 2 trends. One is, towards distributed teams. People are looking to hire talent, wherever the talent might be. Okay. Here in the Bay Area, hiring is very, is a challenging, to say the least. Companies, for this reason, for the practical reason of not being able to scale, as well as for cost reasons, OpEx, companies are looking to hire wherever the talent might be and wherever the cost, is optimal. I don't know if I answered, your question, but
yeah, absolutely. Yanni, what's your perspective?
So I've been at Facebook for over almost 3 years now, and then before that I was built the data science team at Odesk and Upwork, and so I saw the Upwork model was it's a marketplace for hiring remote freelancers, and the company itself actually dog foods its own product, and so the 90% of the engineering team is actually the team of engineers that we've hired through the platform itself, through our own product, and so there it's it was. Before remote work was hot, it was actually the model that's we're operating at. So I've seen the hiring distributed teams with the mode of let's bring the work where the worker is and let's not try to do the other thing around. And then Facebook has traditionally had a more traditional model where it's very Silicon Valley based, and as it's seeing, I think the difficulty in convincing people to move over here because of the housing and the cost of life, or recruiting from each other who's already here. They started building offices in Seattle, New York, Boston, London, big hubs to try to tap into some of the rest of the talent. the big change for Facebook has been this realization that remote work will be the future, and Mark Zuckerberg actually announced back in March it's there's no longer going to fight, I think, the trend, and the plan is for them in the next 5 years, by 5 years, 50% of the team will actually be all remote. And so it's amazing to see the model that's we were trying to evangelize 10 years ago at Upwork and all this now become mainstream. It's in bigger companies with tens of thousands of people. And so in terms of the type of growth, so in the Upwork case, I think it's more Eastern Europe, also people in Greece, Eastern Europe, and some people in Asia, just because of the time zone differences. But then in the US, for Facebook has been primarily how do we tap in the US market, and so there's some of the differences there, where it's in some cases people are willing to take the heat with the time zone change or cultural differences of the team members, and in the other case it's more around let's tap on the same cultures, pretty similar time zone, but again not just restrict on the Bay Area.
That's great. I'd like to move to some of the challenges of scaling. And Christo, I know you've been a serial entrepreneur. You've grown a number of businesses, and you're in growth mode now. Talk to us a little bit about the challenges of scaling from your perspective that you found, and the gotchas of trying to scale a team.
And I think I've seen the movie multiple times. I've seen basically how scaling teams was done in the past, how scaling is being done now. I can tell you that when I remember the first startup when we did, maybe it was 99, 2000, all the VCs were saying, you pretty much go and have to scale the company, go and find some outsourcing vendor in India. It was basically the first time, right? My opinion, by the way, and this is kind of a fact that I've seen throughout the years, that remote teams, if I were to choose, should it be remote or should it be under one roof? I don't think there's not even a comparison. Everybody under one roof is so much better. You can pretty much go and build things that don't even compare with, having to communicate different time zones. There's so much overhead. Obviously, that's not possible now. So you have to pretty much go and scale companies and teams, right, remotely. But I think the challenges are manifold, cultural, right? You try to scale a company, and some people are going to be in Bay Area, some people are going to be, let's say, in India, some people in China. You talk to the Indian outsourcing team, can you guys do this? Yes. Do you do it? Yes, right? So, but the yes doesn't mean that, I can do it. Yes means I'm not going to tell you no. It's just a cultural thing. I mean, once you basically figure it out, then you pretty much lost 6 months, okay? China is exactly the opposite. They don't tell you like that. They tell you exactly the opposite, right? Greece, now we have some operations in Greece, small, almost 20 people. For a startup is a big thing, by the way. But we figured out we're gonna try to invest a bit more in Greece. Scaling here has to do with, again, limited scaling, right? When we talked about 20 people, what scaling is 20 people, by the way, or 50 people? If you want to hire 1,000 people, a company like VMware, maybe like Juniper and stuff, it's a different Facebook, right? You guys are big companies, so you want to pretty much go and build the whole center of hundreds of people. It's very tough to do that, right? It's much easier to build a small project of 10, 20, 30 people and build it in, let's say, Greece, for example, right? For anything bigger, it's actually pretty challenging, right? But I think, to me, the number one issue was the cultural issues that I noticed over the years. Number two is how to absorb those members into the team. Imagine 2000, there was no Skype. Skype had just basically came together, right? And you had different tools to be able to communicate. So how can you basically now make remote working possible? It's not possible to do it. Now, obviously, you have everything, right? Bandwidth is there. There's also expectation from the user that from everybody that, if I'm working from home and if the kid goes in the back and starts screaming, fine, it's logical, it's fine, you're in the home. That was not the case in the past, right? In the past, you go to the office, you operate like that, you scale the company in a remote location. Now you can scale it in a different way, right? But I think still, if you see that what happened over the last few months, you'll notice that, again, everybody works from home now, okay? But most of the companies, the team members they're working a lot harder, a lot more, maybe 30% more, and the productivity is down. You do not produce the same amount of things that you used to produce in the past. It's very evident. I mean, I see it in our company. I mean, pretty much we are a startup. Obviously, we're working 24/7, but whatever we're producing is not the same as if the same team were under one roof in Palo Alto. I don't know if you guys notice the same thing, but for me, it's like definitely the case. I can see that. Now, in terms of challenging of scaling would be also like cost, right? I mean, don't assume that if I go to Greece, if I go to other countries, it's going to be cheaper. It's not that much cheaper, right? It is very comparable to maybe somewhere in the US, maybe not Bay Area, but somewhere in the US. But I think the challenge that you have today is, as Yanis mentioned and Konstantin mentioned, is that you can't find talent where you want. I mean, Bay Area is almost impossible to find talent. So you have to go. I mean, we are going to Seattle. We have a small office in Seattle. We have an office in Pittsburgh. We have an office in New York. So we're going to be building now those things as we see talent, right? There's no other way. And the good thing about this COVID situation is that made that thing possible, made it a fact of life. I don't have to justify why we're doing, why we're hiring somebody in Greece, why we're hiring somebody in India, or why we're hiring somebody in New York. That used to be the case, to basically go and build a team in some remote location and scale it there. I mean, in a startup context, you had to justify it to VCs that are very strong-headed. And they don't even understand, some of them didn't even understand how to build a business and how to operate a team. Okay, some of them knew, some of them did not know. So they said, okay, my friends are building the team in Romania, you have to go to Romania, go and figure out a way. Or everybody's going to India, you have to build it in India. Why? You guys see what I'm saying? So yeah. It was actually fairly challenging. And I think this, over the years, in multiple manifestations, with pretty much every VC in the Valley, because I've raised money from everybody, with any type of company, from like hardware, software, AI, data-driven company, small companies and big companies. At VMware, I used to be there for like 2 years, and I had a team in Beijing. In fact, was the best thing we had. And those guys wanted to come to the US. And I brought 50% of the team to the US, because that's where they wanted to be. And the minute these guys came to the US, they were extremely productive. So I don't want to say that I'm against remote working, but the notion that everybody is going to be remotely working and it's going to be so much better for the world, not true.
That's great. That's really good perspective. Laz, what's your take on all this?
Well, so I've actually, so like Christos, I've been around, and so I've watched this come and go for the last 20 years. I think in the early 2000s was when if you started a company. So I was running software development at a company called EqualLogic. It was a startup, and I was the one of the first 10 people in, and I was the director of software. And our VCs were doing exactly what you said, Chris. I was like, oh, so why aren't you going to India? So EqualLogic was in the middle of nowhere for the United States. We were in Nashua, New Hampshire. So if you haven't been to Nashua, New Hampshire, it's the coldest place on earth. So no one wants to come work up there. And we had to actually come up with a way to scale that organization that overcame that objection. And so we got to be very, very creative over time in order to do that. But this is something that's very trendy. I think it's the biggest challenge is, again, echoing another point, it's culture. and you're scaling and you're trying to maintain a culture, and it is so much easier to set the tone, to get everyone to understand what the right and the wrong thing is to do and how we as a team do things if they're all under one roof. It is so much easier for people to make creative interpretations of what the right thing to do is if they're in India and the home office is sleeping. And so that is one of the biggest challenges. And EqualLogic was kind of an interesting company. We got acquired by Dell. I ended up having to scale the company or the software organization to many hundreds of engineers. And so it was a very, very interesting learning experience about what worked and what didn't work. I have some very, very sort of employee-centered sort of cultural norms that I try and instill in people, because I figured out what did and didn't work, what kept people happy, what made them angry, what frustrated people. And I think we frequently overlook these types of things when we're trying to scale. I've been in the hyper growth, like first at Dell and EqualLogic. When we got funded at Clear Sky Data, we had to hire 30 people in something like 6 months. It took us a year, but we hired the right 30 people, which was a better outcome in my opinion. But it's very, very easy to overlook what the employees are looking for. And in a startup, you're not going to be able to offer them the highest compensation. Let's just face it. That's just one of the things. So you have to think about what it is that you're going to be offering them. And so this is another challenge. I like to say that I offer people sanity. My apologies to those of you that work at large companies. Actually, I work at one too, but making sense of things inside of a large organization is generally very complex, and you as an employee don't have a lot of visibility into what's going on unless you're very high up. So a typical rank and file engineer has no idea, and you end up getting into these very, very interesting psychological holes where people have these disconnects, and they become incredibly unhappy and they leave. And so the whole notion of retention during a period of hypergrowth is very, very important, and that's one of the things that I've learned painfully at times to really try and focus on. The things that I always say is that first of all, employees want visibility, they want control and progress over their own work. They want to have a sense of reward. So if you can't give them those really three things, they're going to eventually be unhappy. You're not going to be able to scale the organization, especially in a remote team. One of the most interesting things that I noticed with remote teams, and I don't know if this is true for the rest of you guys, people make up their own little worlds because they don't. Their inputs and their outputs are limited to a Zoom meeting. And so they make inferences. They decide that somebody hates them when they don't. They make interpretations from little lines in emails that suggest something that is completely untrue. And they make up stories and they make up conspiracies. It's a very, very hard thing to do with remote teams. And so one of the things as leaders that we learned is that you have to be constantly talking to people and repeating the same thing over and over again. So that everyone understands that nothing's changed, that we're still on the same page. It's actually much more tedious in a remote or multi-team environment, because you as a leader, you're just basically saying the same thing over and over again. And you get on an airplane, you go someplace else, you say your thing, you make sure everyone's on the same page, and then you make sure that you come back 3 or 4 weeks later to do the same thing. So it's a tough life, and so we're kind of donating our bodies to science. I haven't yet. I don't know if any of the panelists have found a better way to do that, or if anyone has noticed the same kind of characteristics of remote teams in terms of culture. But it's something that I kind of see as it's probably a thesis for somebody in a business school somewhere at some point to write.
Those are excellent points, Lazare. You know, a number of you touched on a few different aspects of remote working, working during COVID and all that. So let's do a little, before we move on to inclusion and diversity, let's do a little rapid fire, like one word answer kind of thing. We can go in the sequence that we went with the questions. So Konstantinos first, then Yannis, then Christos, and then Laz. Let's start with productivity. Is productivity up or down? One word answer. Yanni.
I would say it's up.
Okay, that's 4 words, but that's fine. Costa?
Up. It's up.
Christo?
Down per person. If I look at one person, down.
Lazare?
Down.
2 up, 2 down. All right, it's a tie. Is location irrelevant? Yanni?
To an extent, like if it's in the same time, yeah, to an extent. I mean, it's irrelevant where in the US you are, for example.
Costa?
Yeah, look, location at large is irrelevant. You want one word, but I want to say that you know, especially given what Christos said, there are certain you know, sync points where being in the same room, spending a day together, is invaluable. Past that point, I think location is irrelevant.
Okay. Christo?
It's relevant now, but it is relevant in general.
In general, yeah, my question was in general. It's relevant in general, in your view. Okay, Lazare?
It's relevant. I'll
Relevant.
stick with it.
We have another tie. This is an interesting panel you put together. Is the office dead?
It's not that.
Yanni?
No, it's not.
No? Costa?
Yeah, no, the office is not dead. The
office
office
is not dead.
is slimmed down.
All right. Christo?
Well, if you ask WeWork, it is dead. But see, I'm in the office, so it's not dead.
I want to challenge Christos. Christos is all for being in one location, yet he says the office is dead. They don't die.
I'm in the office. I'm in the office. I'm probably the only guy that has a background in the office because I want to be in the office.
You're aspiring to be in an office. That's what you're saying.
Exactly.
This could get very spiritual about what the meaning of an office is. And
I think what you say, Christo, is that you're admitting that the office has changed.
No, the office changed. Look, I think the whole thing changed, right? I'm not saying that things hasn't changed quite a bit, but the main thing to notice here is that this change was a bit forced on us, as opposed to something natural. Obviously, it's not natural what happened, right? Now, this change brought a few good things, especially for countries like Greece, right? A lot of things actually are very good. I think COVID helped Greece quite a bit. There's no question about it. Not just on hiring remote workers, but a bunch of other things. But like, I'll give you now an example of my experience in my previous company. So we built a cybersecurity AI startup from the beginning, zero, from PowerPoint to having a product, fairly complex product, right? Running at NSA in 12 months and build a team of 70 people and selling the company in 14 months for a pretty big amount of money. That there's no way to do that if you were remotely. It's very, very tough. Okay, now similar technology at this company, more remote, more issues, right, with COVID and stuff. 3 years later, we have less technology perhaps than what we built in a year. Why is that? It's hard to coordinate, hard to communicate. Just to give you an idea also of how you do an interview. I think this is actually an interesting question, and I want to get also everybody's opinion. You want to hire somebody in Greece, in Romania, in Russia, in China, India, right? How do you do an interview if it's a remote worker? How are you going to do it? Is it the same type of interview you're doing when somebody comes in the office, or is it a different type of interview? How do you hire somebody?
Well, at AWS, we do the same thing. We just do it over the video conference. And part of the problem here is that you need to have a process for interviewing, and then you need to make sure that it's consistently applied across every single set of interviews. And if you haven't thought about how it's going to work in a remote environment, then it breaks down. Like a lot of times, you don't realize how much you are dependent on the interpersonal aspect of interviewing, getting a personal rapport. And it's really, especially in scaling, it's about having a repeatable process. I hate to make everything sound like an engineering problem, but this is fundamentally something that we have to do. I don't know the right answer either, by the way, but we're trying like hell to have a very, very uniform, repeatable process, so that if somebody goes through a certain stage of interview, we have an understanding of where they are in terms of the qualification. The hard part still is cultural, and how to ascertain a cultural fit in that world is very, very hard, because a lot of it is interpersonal and it's interactive. You can't get this.
And beyond interviews, I mean, I think you guys are hitting on a really good point here. It's not just interviewing, it's onboarding as well. When you've hired someone and they've never been in an office and they've never met a single person, how do you integrate them? How do you do that? Maybe let's start from Yanni on this one.
Well, I mean, so at Facebook, we all went 100% mandatory work from home since March, and I think we're mostly hopeful that starting in March with the vaccine, some people that want to start going, but back to the office. But one of the things that is helping, I think, with Facebook is the fact that you already had sort of like these distributed centers, and so teams already were used to the fact that not everybody was in the same office. It's like even in Menlo Park, there are like 10 different buildings, so like you would just have to be on a conference call with people in there. There are a few practical aspects I think that I've seen help. We have this portal device that now everybody in the office has. It has a smart camera that follows you around, and it's like it really makes, I think, video calling much easier. It doesn't take up your laptop. You can have somebody on the side. So some teams have this open all the time just to make it feel like they're around. But the main thing that has changed is the fact that we realize that it will accelerate, I think, this trend, and that you cannot fight it, right? So I think it's like the fact of realizing that you cannot fight it. It's actually going to help. So let's just plan around it. So there is this effort now, just understand how can we go and hire people, not just in the centers, but really support people that are starting in their own home, right? So and what do they need infrastructure wise to set up a great home office? Let's make it easy for them in terms of support, in terms of shipping whatever accessories they have. There's if people have visited the Facebook office, there are vending machines that you can go and grab a charger or a headphone or what have you. How does this look like in a world where everybody is there? It's it's funny how I feel like I work for the CIA. There's a phone number that you can call, and suddenly the next day something appears on your front door, and you have a new laptop, or you have a new phone, or what have you. So there's I think more around the fact that you realize that the trend is accelerating, and just planning everything around this trend. And it's a big set of things. It's not just onboarding or just hiring. It's the whole aspect of you used to have an office, you used to base your culture around having an office. You're not going to have an office anymore. So how do you adjust to that?
If I may add a couple of points, there is some echo. I'm not sure where it's coming from. I don't know if everybody hears that, but so let me just comment on a couple of related but disconnected things. Christos has a very strong opinion. Christos has a strong opinion regarding being in the same room, and I can relate to that. But that's almost necessary when you jumpstart a business, a company. Nothing is as important as being in the same room, having the sensing the same level of passion, energy, etc. But when we are talking about scaling a business, right, the issues are different, I think. Lars touched upon culture, and Christos. Culture is extremely important, and so is communication. Regarding the remote work office, I just want to mention a piece of news I heard yesterday that there was, I think, a Pew Research, a pretty large-scale research that interviewed people, professionals working remote, and 90% of them said they would prefer to stay in the current setting, working remote. 90%. Okay, of course, the employers will have the final saying, but there's no question that this is going to have a permanent impact, what we're experiencing now. And if I may share my own experience, I left VMware with my team of 10 people, and we moved to Juniper in June. I met only the CEO and the CEO of the company, CPO of the company, and nobody else, right? So in 6 months, I've grown the team to about 30. I did a small acquisition. I feel as if I know many of these people with whom I interact for years, literally. I feel that, and it's not just me, the sentiment is reciprocal. And we have not, even though, yes, we could have benefited by being in the same room a few days during these 6 months. I have not, sensed any, we're not missing anything. As a matter of fact, productivity has been up for us, right? And this is revealing for me too. I could never imagine that I would have this kind of experience, be so busy by working remotely, not having met, physically most of the colleagues.
Very good point. Unless anyone else has anything to add to this topic, I propose we move to inclusion and diversity for the next few minutes. So that's one of the other big forces of this year. The pandemic is really at the front of everybody's mind, but there's been a lot of focus, as everybody knows, on issues of discrimination and on inclusion and diversity more broadly. And I'd like to hear the panelists' perspective on how they have embraced inclusion and diversity this year, and how and whether the pandemic and the inclusion and diversity issues kind of intertwine at some level, and how they're managing that. So let's go to Lazarus first.
So this is interesting because we have a diversity problem in the United States in a huge way. So when I was if any of you went to engineering school in the United States, you were probably amongst a bunch of white men. There are no women. There's no one of color, and it was sort of like Hunger Games. It was a very, very tough environment in general to get through, and so we reap what we sow. And so the strategy for me has been for the last 10 years is to try and work the youth side of this, and really work with, as I've worked with large organizations when I was at Dell, now when I'm at AWS, I spend a lot of time in the colleges and universities trying to recruit engineering talent that is more diverse. You can find it there. I think that things have changed substantially in the colleges and universities of the United States with respect to diversity, and so you can be more successful if you're looking for someone with 10 years of experience and you are hoping that they're not a white male. You're playing very slim odds, and famously, so I've worked with and for some very, very brilliant women, but it turns out I think there's two of them in the Boston area that know anything about hard technology, and I've worked with both of them. It's a very, very small club, and similarly for people of color. And I think that one of the important things that we can do as leaders is to try and be recruiters for people that are looking for careers in technology, and that's the only real way to do this. We can't conjure up new people. I think it's helpful that COVID has sort of expanded our hiring market somewhat. So you can cast a broader net, but even still, there's a question of culture, fit, suitability in terms of skill set. You know, it's a very, very hard thing. We have made commitments, hard commitments, that we will be more diverse a year from now, and I have no doubt that we're going to meet them. But there are limits to what you can do, and so you know, the big problem is more systemic, and I think that you know, all of us have a job to do to try and encourage more diverse you know, candidates to actually even consider the career, the field.
That's why
Lazar, you made some really good points there. I just want to highlight the point that Lazarus made, that you know, you see that so often. You see companies that push for inclusion and diversity, and at the same time hold the bar really high when it comes to years of experience. And those two things are just not mutually compatible. And I think that's a great point. Who wanted to go next?
I can go next. I share Lazarus's perspective. And by the way, you should go hide in Greece, where we have more women engineers. A lot more.
Let me.
So I was I was quite involved in discussions with VMware and at Juniper about inclusion and diversity. And there is no question it's a big problem in the United States and probably across the world. But it's a practical problem, and I couldn't agree with Laz more. I took the same position that if you really want to look at this problem genuinely, you should look at it as a long-term problem that requires investment now in high schools, mentoring and following and helping and supporting women and students of color to go towards engineering or disciplines that typically do not pursue, right? There are socioeconomic issues that make that a challenge. So companies that really mean it, companies like Facebook or Google, etc., that's where they need to invest and reap the rewards 5 or even 10 years later. Because right now it's a demand and supply problem, right? VMware tried to put quotas, and the question is, okay, if you cannot meet the quotas, you impact the business. If you say, as a matter of fact, I know decisions coming from the, CEO saying, okay, every 4 hires, 1 will be a woman, 1 would be, a hire of color from, underrepresented groups. That's great. But if I cannot, because Facebook wants the same and Google wants the same, and we are all going into a very limited supply pool, it's impossible, right? So what do? I hold back on those hires, right? And I impact the business. So one way is to, I think it's a lot easier to hire women these days, especially if you're willing to go remote. And I believe that in Greece we have great, engineering talent among women, more supply than in the US on a per capita basis. But it's a long-term problem, So you need to also address the need to really face the problem straight on right now, but also invest for the future. And we don't do the latter.
One thing I would add is there's the long-term issue. There is the recruiting aspect. There is also for the people that we brought into the company, how do we help them grow and help retain them? And you would imagine that's a lot easier to do, but there's still, I think, all these bias and inclusion aspects that you still have to manage internally. So there's also, I think, emphasis on when we have a young woman engineer, how do we give her all the support internally so we can help her grow? How do we bring in leaders internally also that's are excited to help underrepresented people? And I think doing both goes hand in hand. I think you can find all the people and they can come in and they can be treated wrongly and then just leave, and you're just back to where you were.
Christo, anything you'd like to add?
You don't want to hear my opinion. No, I think, look, I agree with everybody. I think this is all the comments are right. There is no diversity. Just let's not ridicule ourselves, right? There's no diversity. There's no inclusion. I mean, trying to do that. I mean, we have been trying for many years, and lately, even now, even the VCs now are saying, guys, you need to, in our portfolio companies, we need to have a better kind of ratio because the ratio looks pretty bad. There's no way. I mean, you cannot find the talent. On the other hand, imagine if you are now female African American, you find a job tomorrow, any job you want, right? But in practice, this is actually policies at a different level. It's not something that the company can do. This is really long-term strategy that the whole country has to do, the educational system has to do, the society has to do, right? Hasn't happened. And again, in Greece is the same thing, by the way. It's not that it's any different. I mean, majority of them are still white male. I mean, engineering schools are pretty much like, I remember when I went to Greece at school for my first degree, there was 5 women, 105 people, 5 women,
Yeah.
1988. Same thing now, maybe changed quite a bit, but how much, right? And now the question is that are you gonna drop the standard of who you're gonna hire because, oh, this is a female or this is a person of color? Would you do that? And in fact, we are doing it, the startups were doing it, but we always basically get into the trap that this is not the right person and we have to fire the person. Because a small company like us doesn't have the luxury to maintain somebody for a long time to keep the diversity and the proper ratio. We have to hire and fire very fast if something doesn't work, right? Because then we're going to be liable to our VCs and the board. They'll basically say, guys, just make sure you have diversity, but at the same time, I want to see the numbers. How can you have see the numbers, right? It's like chicken and the egg. You cannot just do that. We have to. So it's not easy. I think it's actually a much bigger problem than what it seems like. Everybody's talking about it, but it's not an easy solution. Not something that you can pretty much go and fix it easily.
Indeed.
I have another comment on that, just to beat up on that point, because actually I think Christo just pointed out something that is very interesting. As a startup, I used to have so much more latitude. The exorbitant privilege of startups, I always used to say, is that we can do whatever we want with people. So we can make hiring decisions that are a little bit awkward and grow people more easily because we can take certain risks. It's much harder to do that inside of a process like AWS. And so because it's not flexible, and so you have to be you have to think outside the box a little bit in terms of how to do that. And so I believe that if diversity is going to happen, it's probably going to happen inside of startups, because this is where the demands of scaling and the demands of the environment require you to perhaps be more flexible.
Very interesting. All right, let's spend the last 10 minutes or so before we open it up to Q&A, talking a little bit about Greece. We've touched a little bit on Greece and how Greece fits into all this, but let's go and zoom in now. So with so many places that organizations can go build teams at, and notwithstanding the fact that we are of Greek background and we kind of have a little bit of a bias here. If you take that bias aside, why would anybody go build a team in Greece? What is it that Greece brings to the table that other places don't? We can go back to Yanni and start there.
So I think that by far the best thing that Greece has is a great talent and a great geography that's like can attract and keep the talent. I think the reason I think people want to stay in Greece or want to move to Greece, it's for the fact that you can have like a great life, walk to the beach, and at the same time we have really good like colleges, universities. And like by all means, I think the bar in terms of the engineering talent we have is pretty high. So it's sort of like in this world where you can go anywhere you want. So like people can move there for the quality of life. As a matter of fact, I have several friends in the Bay Area that's like work at Google, Facebook, and now it's like they're saying they were planning to move to Greece anyways in the next few years. They're saying let's just do it now because instead of being locked in a one-bedroom apartment in San Francisco, I can be 5 minutes from the beach, right? And so I think that's by far the main advantage it has. Like it's a great place for people to live, and we're lucky to have people that have a great talent as well.
I mean, I have to say that's a pretty good sales pitch for Greece right there. Costa, you mentioned that you had built a team in Greece. Is that why you built a team in Greece?
No, I agree with Yanni. First of all, we're not biased. Greece is the best place on earth, right? And if you have not visited, I highly recommend. So location, as Yanni said, is definitely a big plus. We are part of the European community that brings a lot of additional, dividends for any corporation. Another reason to go to Greece is because, everybody goes to India or China or Romania and the Eastern European countries. So there is more supply, great engineering talent, and that's something that we need to address, in a more thoughtful way, because that's becoming a challenge. Great culture. I can tell you that, back at Bytemobile, we started, I started a small team in Greece. We grew it to 90 people in Patra, not in Athens, right, mind you, before the highway was completed. And we had people, visiting, every month from the US, from India. Our team in India, they were excited to go to Greece. The European team was going there all the time. We had our annual, tech summits there. Then when, we got acquired by Citrix, one of my key priorities was to make sure that Citrix understood the value, the ROI, which was very compelling. And our board, actually Benchmark Capital, started talking to other companies to go to Greece. They said, look at Bytemobile. To make the long story short, Citrix has grown the team from 90 to now I think it's 160 and growing, right? Because the ROI was compelling. The output, the productivity is higher than any other location. It's a university that produces 400 graduates every year in computer engineering, computer science, right? And yes, you don't want to, source from all of them, but if you take half of them, they are really pretty compelling talent. So there are many, many reasons, and I repeated the same with VMware and now with Juniper. The ROI is compelling.
And Christo, you mentioned you had started a team in Greece as well. What's your take on this?
It's the first time, by the way, I started a team in Greece.
Oh, really?
I try to avoid it. Most of the time, I try to avoid it. I had pretty bad experience, to tell you the truth, in the beginning, like long time back. This time, this is the first time. I mean, previous company was the first time I basically hired Greeks in the US. This is the first time I started a team in Greece. So last time it was kind of okay. This time with the team in Greece, I can tell you that it is working. It is working out. We have a very good team, extremely capable team. But I think it depends on how you're going to hire and if you have middle management. If you don't have middle management, things do not work out.
Yeah.
The problem with Greece, by the way, is that middle management in engineering is not there. It's a fundamental issue. And again, it will become something that Greece is going to have in the next 5 years, I think. But it takes some time. And all these guys now have to they're working with companies in the US. So in 5 years, they'll know what to do. But right now, it is still very weak. India, 2001, I remember I outsourced and I had 3 separate teams in 3 different cities in India. So I had Bangalore. I had three different sites, I remember, and they were competing. They're doing the same project, all of them, because I did not trust anybody. No source code, okay? And VCs were basically telling me you have to make sure that these guys work. At the time, India did not have any middle management, very poor in terms of execution. The quality of engineering was very low. I had to do it because I was forced to do it. Once the issue came in the US and everybody started going back to India, you had a bunch of people from IIT and other kind of seasoned people that went back and they built middle management layer in India. And then they started doing projects there and even starting companies and so on and so forth. Greece is in 2003. We're still lacking that middle kind of management layer. We have a lot better engineers, much better engineering intellect, right? What I don't know, and I'm gonna basically see, is the ethics. I think the ethics so far, what I have experienced with the team, which I did not know them from the beginning, right? This is a new team that I did not know them personally. It's a different thing to go and kind of hire your friends. It's another thing to hire a team and start building a team which you don't know. The ethics is so far is very high. They have very high standards, which is a good thing. That's my initial observation. They're working very hard. And for us, we're going to be we'll continue to invest in Greece. I think we want to double the team in the next few months.
So the point you made on management talent is really interesting, Christo. It's something that you don't hear very often. Everybody talks about the engineering skills and the quality of the graduates, but it's easy to miss the fact that you need that layer of management to be able to succeed. Lazar, did you have some perspective to add here?
Well, I seem to be in sync with Christos a lot. So I think so. I've never run or hired in Greece, so I'm sort of the odd man out in this particular group. I know a lot of fellow entrepreneurs in Boston that actually have, and the talent pool seems to be very, very deep there, and I think that speaks very well for the future of Greece. If you want to find an individual contributor that has a particular skill set, it's often much easier to do that in Greece than it is to actually try and do it in, I don't know, the Bay Area, for example. That is, that's goodness, and I think it's also good for Greece. The problem is, again, and every time I've gone down the path of having remote teams, it's always about leadership and management and how to put the structures in place to get those teams productive, and how do you divide work, and how do you project manage it, and how do you keep everyone on the same page, and how do you get the communication to happen. That's a management problem. It's a leadership problem. And I'm open to answers. I don't think that anyone has a really good solution for keeping people together when one set of people is sleeping while the other is working, and vice versa. It's a hard thing to do. The best thing to do is that autonomy and autonomous teams. I've not met a lot of engineering managers that are, have impressed me in Greece. It's a talent that is. I always say, becoming a manager it requires that you first had to raise at least 2 children, and that is, unfortunately, that there's a certain set of qualities that I think need to be developed there, and I haven't seen on. I'd love to go to Greece and just be the manager. It sounds like it's a lot of fun, but I don't know that you're going to see that anytime soon. And I don't know what's going. Maybe some of you that are actually in Greece, is a good question. Is there a focus in academia on these types of leadership skills, and that would now, for example, product managers and people managers, come out of business schools in the United States. Where does that happen in Greece, and how can we help?
And that actually it brings me to the last question that I had. It's a great segue into the last question. Before I ask the question, I'd like to encourage all the participants, all the attendees, to submit your questions. We're going to Q&A right after this. But my question was, what can Greece do to make itself a better place to scale teams? And Lazare, you started answering that by making a point around business education. I think that's certainly one thing that's a takeaway from me here. Who wants to go next?
I can take it. I agree. There is no available experienced large group of managers in Greece. That doesn't take anything away from the fact that we can grow them, and I'm not sure that we need to look. Business schools can help, but with a little bit of mentorship, you can create middle management within your teams. But yeah, for senior management, that the problem becomes more acute in my view. One anecdotal example: during the Bytemobile days, one of my senior engineering leaders decided to go to relocate to Greece with his family. Right, one of his daughters was born in Patras. They loved it. They spent 2.5 years there, and he helped mentor some of the managers who took over after he left. There are many ways to address the problem, but in terms of hiring, senior management that you can just find and locate, the demand again is very high and the supply is very low. Business schools can help, universities can help, but there is nothing like experience, and that's a problem. I think it's something that will, it's a problem that will address itself as we see more entrepreneurial activity in Greece taking root.
Great. Christo, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I know the solution, guys. It's very simple. Kill the public sector, which is a good thing, by the way, because over the last 10 years, what happened is many people see the best talent in Greece, the best talent, take the best students from universities. If they did not go for a master's PhD outside the country and stay in Greece, what they would do is just join the public sector. They would try to find an opportunity to join the public. Why? Because it was paying much more. You didn't do anything, and you could do something on the side. Now that changed, because now the salaries now became a lot lower, and that smart person now is going to start a company, join some other company, and so on and so on. This is something that started over the last 2-3 years. And in fact, I actually hired 2 people from a public sector. I'm kind of totally against it, by the way, but I hired 2 very smart people. They wanted to make a change in their lives. They figured out that this is basically their way out from the misery at the end, right, of the whole thing over the last 10 years. So killing the public sector is the solution to get all the smart people. There's many smart people, by the way, working in the public sector. Get them out in the market to basically produce products and build things, right? And they're good managers. Some of them are very good managers too, by the way. But they're just hidden in some offices, in some random buildings nobody knows about, right? For the last 20 years or 10 years. And that is happening. Good things that it is happening.
All right. Excellent discussion, guys. Thank you. Let's go to Q&A. I'll pass it back to Endeavor to help us coordinate this.
Yes. Perfect. Thank you so much for this discussion. We've already been getting some questions, and I see that people are commenting also on that chat. We have people. I mean, I see all these really cool companies: Spota Wheel, Orpheum, Loctio, Convert Group, 8 professors from university. It's a really cool group. Dimitris from Milia, Marco from Upstream, and our board. And Marcos is asking, do you think there is any point in Greek VCs? Is investing in Greek founders with some presence in Greece for R&D a viable niche? Or should this be a global game with no local context? This is coming from Marcos.
Greek VCs should invest in Greek startups. Makes no sense for Greek VCs to go outside Greece right now. Absolutely no sense in my view. There is plenty of opportunity to grow Greek startups and make them global companies or great acquisition successes. And we have many, many examples like this.
I agree. I think I study the game of VC a lot. More and more involved in those types of things, and you're looking for a talent pool. You're looking for building the ability to build a functional team, and it seems like it's certainly possible in Greece. I think the question that you have to answer is over the long term, and VC is a very long-term game. The life of an LP fund is like 10 years in general. You could probably get your first fund, and you can probably get your second fund. What's the third fund going to look like, and can Greece sustain a bunch of VC funds, or will the talent pool run dry? Is it too small a place? I don't think I can answer that right now, but I think in the near term, there's a lot of opportunity. So I agree with Constantine.
Anyone else want to weigh in? Let me ask the team to fire up the poll. We have another poll. We did one impromptu as Evan was polling you guys. We polled the audience, and it was quite interesting to see what the rest of the people think about Evan's questions.
And it's interesting to see that the answers of the panel and the answers of the participants were not the same answers.
Yeah.
You see that?
Yeah, they were more optimistic on the work environment continuing to be. I don't remember exactly. I don't know.
I mean, for me, the one that was most striking was the poll indicated that according to the participants, productivity has gone up. The panelists seem to generally think productivity has been sort of flat to down. I think there was one voice. I think Kostas might have said up, but most people kind of said down.
Way up.
Yeah. So you're with the participants. The rest of the panel had a different experience.
I'm also with up.
You're also with up. All right, and half and half.
Anyone who wants to join live and speak, please raise your hand. We'll open up your mic and you can join the conversation. And in the meantime, another question coming from Vangelis Christou is how you as leaders handle culture and mentoring across a big team. Do you work with team leaders? Is there an optimal team size?
I can take a guess. So having gone through that one a few times, yes, there is an optimal team size. I think once you get so just generally as a leader, once you have more than 10 or so direct reports, you've lost your mind. There's only so many ways you can time slice your time and know what's going on. And so I think I've always thought that the ideal team size is somewhere between 6 and say 12. And so as this is actually a scaling problem. So as a leader, you need to be growing leaders so that you always have someone handy that will be able to assume leadership of these smaller teams. The worst, and I've actually been in this position, I'm sure some of the entrepreneurs on the panel have, where you have 25 direct reports. You don't even know where anyone is because you don't have enough time in a week to talk to all these people, and they all report to you, and then you need to manage their performance. So you just don't want to be in that. It happens a lot in startups, and I think it's a failure pattern in my opinion. So you really should be thinking about teams that are order of 6 people, and when you have a team that's 5 or 6 people, you should be thinking about what's the next leader that you're going to grow out of that, and you should always be hiring for a leader. At any point in time, you have no idea who your leaders are going to be. So part of the leadership team that you build is it's the farm system. It's basically you trying to build and grow some of these people. So it doesn't lend itself to a lot of science. It's more art, but that's my answer.
Thank you. Constantino? Yeah.
Culture is, yeah, I mean, I agree with Lars that, as you scale, it becomes more challenging to maintain, the same culture across the team, especially if we're talking about distributed teams. There are a few things that are very important, I think, though, to help maintain the same, mindset, the same culture, the same values as you grow a team. And these include, first of all, a principle of do as I do, not do as I say. It starts from the top. Communication and transparency are extremely important so that everybody, believes in the leaders of the team. Honesty and transparency go a long way in feeling that, making everybody feel that, yes, we're part of a team. We know what's going on. And mentoring your evolving, your bench, so to speak, and empowering people, right? I like to say, I like to put the right person in the right position, give them, the benefit of the doubt until they prove me wrong, and then get out of the way, just let them execute. So there are a few things that we can do, but it's always it's one of the biggest challenges for any team, and even CEOs. I see, CEOs talking about culture, and they have no clue about what that really means. So it's a big problem.
Thank you.
Big challenge.
Thank you. Christo?
Well, many important things here. I mean, I'm always the controversial person. I think I agree with most of the comments here. I think it is like that. The problem here is, I think the ideal size from me, if you ask me, looks like beyond 20, so 10 to 20 people. So let's say for a big company, it's a different thing. Obviously, you always have to have some hierarchy. But what is the ideal team size in general to build a project, right? I always ask that myself. Over the years, I mean, I manage teams, very big teams and very small teams too. So it looks like, irrespective of the team size, 10 people were doing the job. Everybody else was peripheral, always. And beyond 20 people, you just lose the signal. Everybody's busy, by the way. 100 people, hundreds of people, everybody's busy. You don't know what they're doing. They don't know what they're doing, but fine, you're paying them. I mean, everybody's happy. There's basically things going on, but but you rely on like 2 people, 5 people always. And for every company, in big or small, I always notice that you always rely on this like initial core of 10 people. Okay, these guys you cannot lose. Whatever it is, you pay them, right? Now, growing the team, again, something that I developed over the years is that you should not hire stars. Hire mediocre people. Hire mediocre people and make sure these guys can deliver. If you have the management team to deliver with mediocre people, then you do have something. Then that's basically what the thing is. If you basically go and hire stars, you have to make these guys basically operate and work. It's not easy, first of all, because they're going to fight. Number 2, I think Konstantinos has an argument against it.
Christo, don't mix stars with big egos. Okay, they don't always go together. You have stars with no ego, and I can point to many examples. Okay, so let's make the distinction. You want stars, you don't want prima donnas.
You are right. It's just that sometimes those things go together with high correlation. So they do. I mean, I've seen many of these guys that do have big egos and so on and so forth. Anyway, but my point is, you do not want necessarily to hire the best possible person on earth because you think they're going to do the job. They may not do the job. And once you start scaling for like with more people, like let's say, you want to hire 5 people a week. Do you think you can hire those like 5 top talent a week? Impossible. It's not going to be possible. So you need to be able to do your job with medium talent. And you need to have those key guys are also in the organization, right? So it is very tricky of how to build organization. It's not that, let's actually build everybody, the best guys, and let's deliver it. No.
You're touching on cultural points here. I just want to point out, as I always used to tell people at Equal Logic, there's only room for one prima donna here, and that's me. I was here first. But that's you have to be able to. The interviews that I always do, by the way, to ferret that out, I just ask people how they failed and how they've dealt with things. It's the most depressing hour of your entire interview experience, because you're just talking about everything that went wrong, and everyone thinks that I'm trying to mess with them, but in the end, if you can't talk about mistakes, if you're that kind of a prima donna, you can filter these people out, and there are interview techniques, and there are stars that are not prima donnas. Although I can relate that a prima donna who's a star can cause more wreckage and destroy more venture capital than any other methodology.
Absolutely. And you can get sometimes prima donnas that are not stars at all. That's the worst kind, right? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But Christo, I love your candor. I'm going to follow up with you, my friend. You and I need to talk.
But I'll give you a couple of examples, by the way, since we're talking about this. I had 2 stars over the years. One guy that I worked together in a company, we built a big director class switch hardware. He had to build chips, extremely complex chips. The guy would basically ship the chip from tape out without any defect. So, and he was also extremely nice guy. The #1 nice guy I've ever met. You pay this guy millions of dollars, by the way. You do not touch the guy. You touch everybody around him. You don't touch the guy. Second guy that I met at VMware, and from that point on, he quit. I got him into my company. He was doing a company. I managed to convince him to shut down his company and join me. And he basically followed me in that company and the second one, and now he's also in this company. UI guy, the only UI engineer, because UI typically people are not engineers, okay? He's the only UI engineer, okay? And 1 man show. We don't need anybody else. We don't hire anybody. We just make sure this guy has a good health and he doesn't have a problem. You don't basically 1 man show. He delivers for 10 people. You pay him whatever he wants. You don't basically bother him. You do not manage him. He just delivers. So there is those rainmakers, and in a company there are few of them, very few of them, and you definitely need them because they also build a culture. There is a culture has to be built with engineers, which I don't participate most of the time because I don't talk to them every 5 minutes, right? So if somebody does something, those big guys are going to go and tell them, don't do that. It's not the right thing to do. So you need to have those gatekeepers, but everybody else cannot be the same type of guy because they're going to fight. And I also had that experience, even in this company. It's interesting because I put this guy with another guy who supposedly wrote books and stuff, and those guys fought. One guy said, I don't want to talk to him again in my life. So find a way, fire him, I don't know, make him do something else, go and do my coffee. And it's a very awkward situation because you have to make a call at that point, what you're gonna do. And the biggest mistake people make when they scale teams is they don't know when to fire people. And firing is something, we're talking about scaling, but firing is such an important decision that you have to make sometimes, that you have to make it in the proper time because otherwise it doesn't make any sense. So apart from transparency, communication, accountability is such an important thing in any company, by the way, because they have to see that, you know what, if I do that, there's a consequence. And if those two things are not tied together, people can do whatever they want, the organization can suffer, you can scale, you can hire, but it doesn't matter.
I can guess who of the two you fired.
You can guess.
One of my mentors told me that you can't be an effective leader unless you have 1 or 2 dead bodies outside of your office. And
But also when you fire, by the way, depending on the situation, you may have to fire the person you do not want to fire. There's cases, I had a case at which I had to fire a person that did not do anything wrong, but it got involved, this guy got involved into a harassment case. And as a result, that was with a female. And as a result, you have so many other issues you have to deal with. In the US, obviously, you guys know there's so many lawsuits and stuff going on. In this case, it happened that my employee was also an employee of NSA, which I didn't know. So now imagine now the complexity now of the situation. So like, who do you fire now? The guy that didn't do anything or the other person? And you have the board telling you to do the right thing. So now tell me, what is the right thing to do? So anyway, lots of delicate situations when you're scaling teams and lots of decisions you have to make along the way. I don't think there is any one size fits all here, but I think you have to go and look at the situation every time differently. You have to go with your gut, right? I think gut and instinct is such an important thing when you build a team and you want to motivate people.
Thank you. Before moving to the last question, Evan, would you like to also share your thoughts on that? I'm assuming you're managing a large team at American Express. Any insight for our entrepreneurs?
I'm Switzerland here. I'm the moderator. Look, I mean, as you say, I manage a large team. I have about 5,000 people at American Express. So I can relate to pretty much everything that everybody else has talked about here, the importance of firing and the importance of not just firing, but reinforcing what you say with action, right? If you say, as a leader, if you say, teamwork is important to me, and then you let people hang around if they're not good team players, then your message is lost, right? It doesn't matter what you say. It only matters if you reinforce it with action over and over and over, consistently, repeatedly, and visibly. And so I relate to everything that this guy said before.
Amazing. A final question, maybe we can start from Yanni and then we'll close this. I think we have 2 or 3 more minutes. Nick Kayagopoulos from Prime Ventures asks, do you see a possibility for European non-Greek companies and C-level managers to build engineering teams in Greece? And do you think a Greek founder or CTO is required?
So in terms of the possibility, why not? Right? I think there is nothing I think different about Greece itself in terms of like being a US company versus a European company. I think the CTO founder thing, I think it has to do more with the fact that you need to have somebody either on site in Greece or like at the core of the company that is the champion of the move. I think Constantine, I think you talked about that too, but it's never going to happen organically. So you need to have this one person that actually is the person that is championing and is running and is like making sure that people see, I think, the ROI of the investment. And so naturally, this person will be, depending on whether he's based in Greece or not, he's going to be the person that's like will be responsible to run that. It's not just going to happen naturally. I think somebody needs to. And I've heard many stories. I think there's another European company in Yangon, actually. They visited Facebook a couple of years ago, where again one of the key persons, executives, was from Yangon, and he made the case, and there's a big team there. So it's not going to happen by itself. I think there's always somebody behind the scenes.
Thank you. Okay, we have also the results from the polls. Perfect. Anyone else wants to? Konstantinia, I know that you are connected with the Greek ecosystem, and I know that you talk with entrepreneurs, and that you, I guess, you are interested a lot in having a very viable and scalable tech scene in Greece.
Yes, I do. As I said, it's not. It's partly because my limited experience has been pretty compelling. Um, and yes, I have not been able to build thousands, very large organizations, but up to 100 people, I think you can maintain consistent culture. I think Greek engineers, communication is an easy issue. Everybody speaks English. Especially on the technical jargon, everybody, essentially all the graduate engineers are up to speed. There is no difference when it comes to communication between a US-based engineer and an engineer in Greece. The productivity is stellar. And yes, I see what Christos is saying. Sometimes, you have to be very careful on the prima donna front, but I think it's a very manageable issue. So I've seen goodness all around. I've been, thrilled to see a lot of activity lately of companies that start in Greece. They branch out and they create either presence in Europe or in the US, and they are becoming very successful. Yannis is an example. I'm involved, in helping wherever I can, mentor companies. There is a company that I'm very proud of, Aricto. We just closed a finance round with Unusual. This company is just incredible set of people, amazing culture, and great technology, differentiated technology. Keep it in mind, you will see it making news, okay? There are many other companies like this, and we need to help them. Mentoring, I think, at the end of the day, is a responsibility for all of us to help, okay? And all the catalysts are there, I think, to see Greece really branch out as a tech hub in the coming decade. I'm an optimist on that. That's why I need to reach out to my friend Christo. We have so much experience.
And since you mentioned,
it sounds like this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship here.
Oh, we are going to be friends.
And Constantinos, since you mentioned Aricto, you know the story, right? The story with Aricto is that those guys came from the public sector. They came from the university. And I convinced them to leave the university. I tried for 2 years. I finally convinced them to leave the university, leave their salaries. I got them into the US. They stayed in my house, actually. Constantinos, he stayed in my house, tried to raise money. I pushed him so hard to just follow his dream.
Yeah.
But what I'm trying to say here is that it is really those guys that were hidden in all kinds of research labs and public sectors and stuff.
I agree.
They just jump-started and they tried. Like, why not,
I agree, Christo. I agree with what you said about the public sector very, very much. It has still, entrepreneurship in Greece, and the mentality of I'm going to get a permanent, a tenured job in the public sector is something that we need to fight. Yes.
All right, guys, I think we're out of time. Pano, is that right?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay. So I'd like to thank everybody here. I'd like to thank Yannis and Konstantinos and Christos and Lazaros for participating in what I think was a fantastic discussion. And I'd like to thank Endeavor for pulling us together. And I'd like to thank everybody who joined. So we'll see you soon.
Thank you, Evan. Thank you, Panos. Thanks, everybody, and all the participants.
Thanks,
Goodbye.
Thank you. Kalita.
Bye-bye.